Elena had left him only one thing before the cancer took her, a 1960s final record of Bésame Mucho, the song they'd danced to on their wedding night. For 5 years it was all Diego had left of his wife. Then 3 cartel punks broke into his house and shattered it. They had no idea they'd just awakened the deadliest man in Miami. Welcome to Vaulted Secret Stories. Before we begin this story of love, loss, and the moment when a quiet retiree's peaceful life was shattered along with his most precious possession, tell me in the comments, what would you do if someone destroyed the last memory of someone you loved? And if you believe stories about the lengths we go to protect what matters most deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. This story will show you that some people are dangerous precisely because they've chosen not to be. Diego Martinez lived in a modest house in Little Havana, Miami, where salsa music played from corner bodegas. To his neighbors, he was simply Don Diego, a polite widower who could be heard playing the same Spanish love song every evening at 7 o'clock. He must have really loved his wife. Mrs. Herrera would tell her husband as the familiar melody floated through their window. What the Herreras didn't know was that Diego Martinez had once been the most feared enforcer in the Morales cartel. For 15 years, he had been their problem solver, the man they called when someone needed to disappear quietly. But that was before Elena. Elena Vasquez had been a trauma nurse when Diego was brought in with 3 bullet wounds. She had worked on him for 6 hours, refusing to let him die. "You're going to live," she had told him, "but you're going to have to decide what kind of life you want to live." Those words had changed everything. Diego had courted Elena for 2 years before she agreed to marry him, and only after he had completely left the cartel life behind. They had danced to Bésame Mucho as their first song, Elena whispering the lyrics in his ear. "Para siempre juntos," she had said, writing those words on the record sleeve. Forever together, for 10 beautiful years, they had been just that. Diego found work as a mechanic while Elena continued nursing. Then the cancer came. Elena fought it for 2 years with fierce determination. When the doctors finally said there was nothing more they could do, Elena made Diego promise her something. "No going back," she said. "Whatever happens to me, you don't go back to who you were before. Promise me, mi amor." "I promise," Diego had said, meaning it completely. Elena died on a Tuesday morning in spring, with Diego holding her hand and Bésame Mucho playing softly. Her last words were para siempre juntos. For 5 years after her death, Diego had kept his promise. He lived quietly, worked on old cars, and every evening at 7 o'clock, he would play their song on the original vinyl record. It was a ritual that kept her memory alive. The record was all he had left of her. Their photos had been destroyed in a fire, and her jewelry had been stolen. But the record remained, carrying the melody that had defined their love. Diego would sit in his living room as the sun set, listening to the familiar notes, remembering Elena's laugh, her touch, the way she had believed he could be better than his past. The music was his prayer, his daily conversation with the woman who had saved his soul, until the day it ended. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Diego's life changed forever. He had been in his garage working on a Mustang, when he heard breaking glass from inside his house. Diego's first instinct was to reach for the gun he kept hidden. Old habits died hard, but he stopped himself, remembering Elena's words. Instead, he grabbed a tire iron and walked toward his house. The front door was open, and Diego could hear young voices speaking Spanish with casual arrogance. "Check the bedroom for jewelry," one voice said. "This place is a dump," another replied. Diego stepped inside and saw 3 young men in their 20s ransacking his living room. They wore expensive sneakers and gold chains, the uniform of low-level cartel soldiers. "Excuse me," Diego said calmly. "I think you're in the wrong house." The 3 men turned. The leader, a skinny kid with a spider tattoo on his neck, laughed when he saw Diego. "No, old man, we're in the right house," Spider Tattoo said. "Where do you keep the money?" "I don't have any money," Diego said truthfully. "I'm just a mechanic." "Bullshit," said the second kid, built like a linebacker. "Carlos saw you with cash." Diego realized they were talking about his rent money from the previous week. $700 that had probably looked like a fortune to these street dealers. "That was my rent money," Diego explained patiently. "I already spent it. We'll be the judge of that," Spider Tattoo said. Diego watched as they began destroying his home with methodical cruelty. They appended furniture, pulled books from shelves, and smashed picture frames. He could have stopped them even at 55. Diego knew he could disable all 3 in under 30 seconds. But he remembered his promise to Elena. "No going back." "Please," Diego said, his voice carrying pleading. "This is my home. My wife died here. There's nothing valuable, but everything here has meaning to me." "Your dead wife ain't gonna help you now," the linebacker said, laughing. That's when the third kid, a quiet one, searching the entertainment center, picked up Diego's record player. "What about this old thing?" the quiet kid asked. "Careful with that," Diego said, his voice changing. "It's important to me." The quiet kid smiled and lifted the record player higher. "Oh, this is important. What makes it so special, old man?" "It was my wife's," Diego said, desperation creeping into his voice. "Please don't break it, your wife's," Spider Tattoo said, interested. Let's see what kind of music dead ladies listen to. The quiet kid opened the record player and pulled out the vinyl album. Bésame Mucho, the song that carried Elena's voice, her memory, her love. Ooh, old Spanish music. The quiet kid said mockingly. My grandma loves this shit. Please, Diego said, taking a step forward. You can take anything else, just leave the record alone. The desperation in his voice seemed to amuse all three of them. Spider Tattoo nodded to the quiet kid, who held the record up like a frisbee. What do you think, boys? The quiet kid asked. Should we see how far this thing can fly? No, Diego said, his voice barely a whisper. The quiet kid smiled wider and threw the record across the room like a discus. It hit the brick fireplace with a sound that Diego would remember forever, not just the crack of breaking vinyl, but the silence that followed. The silence where Elena's voice used to live. Diego stared at the broken pieces scattered across his floor. 5 years of nightly conversations with his dead wife, ended, last physical connection to the woman who had saved his soul, destroyed by 3 kids who thought it was funny. Oops, the quiet kid said, still smiling. Guess your wife ain't singing anymore. That's when something in Diego's eyes changed. The 3 young men were too high to notice, but Diego's entire posture shifted. He went from looking like a broken old man to looking like something much more dangerous. You know what? Spider Tattoo said. We're gonna take your car to Keith's. Diego looked up from the broken record, and his voice was perfectly calm. The keys are on the kitchen counter. As the 3 men gathered up his TV and headed for the kitchen, Diego knelt down and picked up the largest piece of the broken record. Elena's handwriting was still visible, para siempre juntos. Forever, together. Diego closed his eyes and made a decision that Elena probably wouldn't have approved of, but that felt as inevitable as gravity. Some promises were impossible to keep when the thing you promised to protect was gone. When he opened his eyes, Diego Martinez, the retired mechanic, was gone. In his place was something much older and infinitely more dangerous. The 3 young men made their final mistake by not leaving immediately. Instead, they spent another 20 minutes in Diego's house, eating his food and taking photos with his possessions. They treated his home like their playground, completely unaware that they had just awakened something that should have stayed asleep. Diego used those 20 minutes to make a phone call. In his bedroom closet, behind a false wall, Diego retrieved a cell phone that hadn't been used in 5 years. He dialed a number from memory. I thought you were dead, said a gravelly voice in Spanish. I was, Diego replied, but I'm back. What do you need, hermano? Information. 3 kids just hit my house. Mid-20s, tatted up, driving something flashy. What did they take? Diego looked at the broken record. Everything that mattered. Are you sure about this, Diego? It's been 5 years. The break wasn't my choice, Diego said quietly. I'll make some calls. Give me an hour. While he waited, Diego opened the false wall completely and began retrieving items he hadn't touched in 5 years. A passport in a different name, credit cards that were still active, and, wrapped in an oiled cloth, a custom .45 caliber pistol that had been his signature weapon. The gun felt familiar in his hands, like greeting an old friend. Diego field stripped the weapon, cleaned it thoroughly, and loaded it with hollow point ammunition. From another hiding place, Diego retrieved black tactical pants, a dark polo shirt, and a shoulder holster that fit like a second skin. When he looked at himself in the mirror, the quiet mechanic was gone. In his place stood something that looked like death wearing human skin. The phone rang. The kids you're looking for are part of the Vega crew, Raul said. Low-level dealers. Names are Miguel Santos, Carlos Ruiz, and Pedro Vega. That's the nephew of Eduardo Vega, who runs trafficking from here to Atlanta. Where can I find them? They hang out at a bar called El Lobo on Calle Ocho, but Diego Eduardo Vega is not someone you want to mess with. He's got maybe 50 soldiers. Let him come, Diego said. Think about what Elena would want. Elena is dead, Diego interrupted, and the only thing left of her is broken on my living room floor. After hanging up, Diego drove to El Lobo in Elena's old Honda. He parked across the street and waited. At 8:30 p.m., the 3 young men emerged, laughing and stumbling slightly from drinking. They got into a bright yellow Camaro. Diego recognized the quiet kid, the one who had thrown Elena's record. Diego followed them as they drove through Little Havana, clearly looking for their next target. They were sloppy and overconfident, never checking to see if they were being followed. The yellow Camaro pulled into a strip mall parking lot. Diego watched as the 3 men approached a Mercedes. A deal was going down, probably selling what they had stolen. Diego parked behind a dumpster and approached on foot, using shadows for cover. He could hear the conversation. This stuff is all junk, said an older man by the Mercedes. It's good stuff, man, Spider Tattoo insisted. As Diego listened, he realized these 3 weren't career criminals. They were amateurs, drug addicts looking for quick cash. Diego parked behind a dumpster and approached on foot, using shadows for cover. He could hear the conversation. This stuff is all junk, said an older man by the Mercedes. It's good stuff, man, Spider Tattoo insisted. As Diego listened, he realized these 3 weren't career criminals. They were amateurs, drug addicts looking for quick cash. But they had destroyed Elena's record, and for that, They would learn that some old men were more dangerous than they appeared. Diego waited until the fence had paid the 3 men and driven away. Then he waited until they had finished snorting cocaine off the hood of his stolen Mustang. Only then did he step out of the shadows. "Excuse me," Diego said politely, walking toward them with his hands visible. "I think you have something that belongs to me." The 3 men turned, and Diego could see recognition in their eyes. Spider Tattoo reached for something in his waistband. "Easy," Diego said, still walking forward calmly. "I just want my car back. No problems, no police." "Are you out of your fucking mind, old man?" Spider Tattoo said, pulling out a chrome-plated pistol. "You followed us here?" "Probably," Diego admitted. The quiet kid laughed nervously. "Maybe we should just give him the car, Miguel." "Shut up, Pedro," Spider Tattoo said. Diego filed away the name. "This old man needs to learn a lesson." "I'm always willing to learn," Diego said, stopping 10 feet away. "What would you like to teach me?" "How to die quietly," Spider Tattoo said, raising his gun. That's when Diego moved. 15 years in the cartel business had taught Diego that surviving gunfights wasn't about being faster, it was about being smarter. While Spider Tattoo was bringing his gun up, Diego was already rolling behind a parked car, drawing his .45 and calculating angles. The first shot from Spider Tattoo's pistol went wide. Amateur Diego rose up and put 1 round center mass into Spider Tattoo's chest. The young man dropped immediately. The linebacker had a gun too, trying to use a van for cover while he returned fire, but he was panicking, shooting wildly. Diego moved laterally, staying low, using parked cars for concealment. When the linebacker paused to reload, Diego appeared at the rear of the van and put 2 rounds into him. That left Pedro the quiet kid, who had thrown Elena's record at the fireplace. Diego found him crouched behind the Mustang, crying and apparently unarmed. "Please don't kill me," Pedro said. "I'm sorry about your wife's record. I didn't know it was important." Diego stood over him, his .45 pointed down. For a moment, he could hear Elena's voice asking him not to go back to who he was before. "What's your full name?" Diego asked. "Pedro Vega," the kid said. "Please, I have a little sister." "Vega," Diego repeated, as in Eduardo Vega. Pedro's eyes widened. "You know my uncle." "I know his reputation," Diego said, "which means you know mine, or you will soon." "My name is Diego Martinez," Diego said, watching Pedro's face for recognition. Pedro's expression changed completely. Even the youngest cartel soldiers had heard stories about Diego Martinez, El Fantasma, the ghost. "You're supposed to be dead," Pedro whispered. Diego lowered his gun slightly. "I'm going to give you a choice. Pedro, you can die here with your friends, or you can carry a message to your uncle." "What message?" "Tell Eduardo Vega that Diego Martinez is back. Tell him that 3 of his soldiers destroyed something that belonged to my dead wife. Tell him that I killed 2 of them, and the 3rd lives only to deliver this message." Pedro nodded frantically. "I'll tell him." "Good, because this isn't about your Uncle Pedro, this is about you. You took something from me that can never be replaced, and now I'm going to take everything from you. Your friends, your family, your organization, everything that matters to you is going to disappear, one piece at a time." "But you're letting me go," Pedro said, confused. "I'm letting you live long enough to watch it all burn," Diego corrected. "Then, when you've lost everything, when you understand what you took from me, then you'll die." Pedro stared up at him in horror. "Run," Diego said quietly. Pedro ran. By the next morning, word had spread through Miami's criminal underground. Eduardo Vega received the news in his fortified compound. "You're sure it was him?" Eduardo asked Pedro, who was still shaking. "He said his name was Diego Martinez." Pedro replied, "Uncle ... It was like talking to death itself." Eduardo had heard the stories about Diego Martinez from older cartel members. A ghost who could kill anyone, anywhere, without leaving a trace. "But he's been gone for 5 years, Eduardo said. "Why come back now?" He said. "We destroyed something that belonged to his dead wife," Pedro explained. "A record album. When I broke it, he looked like something died in his eyes." Eduardo understood immediately. This wasn't about money or territory. This was personal, which made it infinitely more dangerous. "How many men do we have available?" Eduardo asked his lieutenant, Hector. 42 soldiers, plus another 20 part-time, Hector replied. "Put out the word," Eduardo said. 50,000 for information leading to Diego Martinez. 100,000 for his head. 3 hours later, the war began. Eduardo's first move was to send 4 soldiers to Diego's house to burn it down. They arrived to find the house empty, with a note taped to the door. "Thank you for coming. Check your phones." All 4 men looked at their phones and found the same message. "Turn around." When they turned around, they saw Diego standing across the street, holding his .45. Before any of them could draw weapons, Diego had put 1 round into each man's center mass. The engagement lasted less than 10 seconds. By that afternoon, 6 more Vega soldiers were dead. Diego killed 2 at a restaurant, 3 at a gas station, and 1 in a parking lot. Each killing was precise, professional, and impossible to predict. "He's picking us off one by one," Hector told Eduardo. "The men are starting to panic." We find this ghost and we kill him, Eduardo said firmly. That evening, Eduardo put out word that he was willing to negotiate with Diego Martinez. They would meet at the port of Miami, in a warehouse that Eduardo controlled. Diego received the message through Raul, who called with obvious concern. It's a trap, hermano, Raul sighed. Eduardo has the entire warehouse surrounded. I know, Diego said calmly. Then why are you going? Because I told Pedro that I was going to take everything from him, one piece at a time. Eduardo is the biggest piece. That night, Diego prepared for what he knew would be his final mission. He cleaned his .451 last time, loaded extra magazines, and wrote a letter to Elena. Mi amor, he wrote. I know you wanted me to stay peaceful, but they broke the last piece of you that I had left. Para siempre, juntos. The warehouse meeting was scheduled for midnight, but Diego arrived early and studied the building. As Raul had warned, Eduardo had positioned snipers on rooftops and stationed armed men at every exit. At exactly midnight, Diego walked through the front entrance with his hands visible. Eduardo was waiting in the center of the space, flanked by Hector and 6 other armed men. Pedro stood behind his uncle, still looking terrified. The famous Diego Martinez, Eduardo said as Diego approached. You're smaller than I expected. Most people are, when they're dead, Diego replied. You've killed 12 of my men in 2 days, Eduardo continued. That's expensive. The price goes up every day you keep breathing, Diego said. Eduardo laughed, though it sounded forced. You're outnumbered 50-1. What makes you think you're walking out alive? I don't, Diego said simply, but neither are you. Before Eduardo could respond, Diego moved. His first shot took out the nearest gunman, while his second and third shots shattered the warehouse's electrical box, plunging the space into darkness. What followed was 15 minutes of brutal urban warfare. Diego moved through the darkened warehouse like a ghost, using his tactical knowledge to turn Eduardo's numerical advantage against him. He killed 6 men in the first 5 minutes, using their muzzle flashes to locate them. The snipers on rooftops tried to provide support, but they couldn't get clear shots without hitting their own people. Eduardo's men were shooting at shadows and often hitting each other. Diego took 3 bullets during the fight, 1 in the shoulder, 1 in the thigh, and 1 that grazed his ribs. But he kept moving, kept shooting, kept reducing Eduardo's army 1 soldier at a time. When the emergency lighting kicked in, the warehouse looked like a war zone. Bodies were scattered across the concrete, and the air was thick with smoke. Only 3 men were still standing: Diego, Eduardo, and Pedro. Diego's .45 was empty, but he had drawn a backup pistol. Eduardo had a machine pistol pointed at Diego's chest, while Pedro cowered behind a concrete pillar. It's over, Martinez, Eduardo said, breathing heavily. You're good, but you're not bulletproof. No, Diego agreed, looking around at the carnage. But I'm already dead, so bullets don't scare me much. What are you talking about? I died 5 years ago, when Elena passed, Diego explained. Everything since then has just been waiting to join her. Your nephew just gave me a reason to stop waiting. Eduardo's finger tightened on the trigger, but Diego was already moving. He dove to the side as Eduardo's machine pistol opened fire, stitching bullets across the concrete. Diego rolled behind a support beam and came up shooting. His first shot hit Eduardo in the chest, spinning him around. His second shot hit Eduardo in the head, ending the leader of the Vega Cartel, which left only Pedro. Diego found him still hiding behind the pillar, crying and unarmed. Please, Pedro said. You've taken everything. My friends, my uncle, my family's business. There's nothing left. There's still you, Diego pointed out. I am nothing without my uncle. I'm just a junkie. Diego considered this. You mattered to Elena. I want you to remember, Diego said finally. Every day for the rest of your life. I want you to remember that your actions have consequences. I will, Pedro said quickly. I promise. No, Diego said, shaking his head. You'll forget. In a few months, this will just be a story you tell. Diego pulled the trigger. The Miami police found Diego Martinez's body in the warehouse an hour later, surrounded by the remains of the Vega Cartel. The official report listed it as a gang war gone bad. What the police didn't find was a note that Diego had written, which had been delivered to Raul with instructions to wait 24 hours. The note contained an address and a request. Raul found Diego's house the next evening. In the living room, he found the broken pieces of a vinyl record scattered across the floor. The note had asked him to gather the pieces and take them to a record restoration specialist. This is pretty badly damaged, the specialist said, examining the fragments, but I think I can save most of it. Raul found Diego's house the next evening. In the living room, he found the broken pieces of a vinyl record scattered across the floor. The note had asked him to gather the pieces and take them to a record restoration specialist. This is pretty badly damaged, the specialist said, examining the fragments, but I think I can save most of it. 3 weeks later, the restored record was returned to Diego's house, where Mrs. Herrera, following Diego's instructions, played it every evening at 7 o'clock, just as Diego had done for 5 years. The neighbors still heard the same Spanish love song floating through their windows each night. They still thought about the quiet widower who had loved his wife so much. They never knew that Diego Martinez had killed 17 people in 2 days to avenge that song, or that he had died believing it was worth it. The record player now sits in the front window of Diego's house, which Mrs. Herrera maintains exactly as Diego left it. Every evening at sunset, Bésame Mucho plays for the entire neighborhood, a daily reminder that some love songs never end. And sometimes, on very quiet nights, neighbors swear they can see two figures dancing in the window, an old man and the ghost of the woman who saved his soul, finally together again, para siempre, juntos.